it wasn't necessarily that you were gonna walk out of that last class and then just go be able to create a GPT, because that's not how learning works, right? The important thing was teaching the steps that were required for creating a GPT. And in that class, we created a GPT that would be able to have any user upload an image and then have an image automatically be created using Dolly. I think one challenge that we did have is I never have access to these recordings, and I'm not sure if it went out to everyone. I saw something come up in the community about getting it, but unfortunately, I don't have access. So if you still haven't seen it, definitely ping Josh or ping Bhavna. I think Bhavna was on vacation, so it's a slight challenge there. Josh, would you be able to enable us me to screen share?
There you go. And Jai, I had the links in Google Drive. I sent you the Google Drive links for each recording. I can re-forward those to you if you'd like.
Yeah, re-forward those, and yeah, we'll take things from there.
And
Also, I
there you
do
go. You
want
have
to,
permissions.
all right, yeah, thank you. And then also I want to say a big congratulations to Dr. Lola, who last week competed in a pitch competition that was sponsored by the Queens Economic Development Corporation, and she just got a little bit of some funding for her business and an absolutely incredible business model, where she is going to be applying a little bit of artificial intelligence with some physical therapy and making a very big impact on Queens and then soon all five boroughs of New York City. So everyone clap it up for one of our classmates. Amazing job. Absolutely, such a tight pitch, so prepared, so calm, so cool, so collected. Amazing job. You know, you always got to celebrate your people, right? All right. Not going to show code. All right. So today's class is, last week we talked about creating a GPT. Now we want to talk a little bit about how to make it work for you. And in this class, there's going to be a little bit of art and a little bit of science of making a GPT. And I think that this is really important because you guys are going to get a little bit of a business education on when the business use case is to use a GPT, when you want to maybe just think like an engineer to then solve some business problems as well, because a GPT is not always the solution. Um, all right. So now, has anyone run into a situation where, you just needed extra help in your business, but you couldn't afford it? Could you drop a heart in your reactions or mention something in the chat if that resonates with you? Let's see. Okay, I see Lola says that, but looks like that doesn't resonate with too many people. Okay, Diane says it as well. So all right, maybe I probably should have had a better hook. But no fear. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about business use cases of using custom GPTs for small businesses, because here's the big idea. Custom GPTs, like in the Moderna case, work really well if you have one job. But for you guys are likely solopreneurs, small business owners, which means you have 21 jobs. And that can make it very challenging because there's a constant changing of nature there. And so I also do want to clarify some of the advanced features that we talked about on instructions, knowledge bases, actions, and then tell you about where you're going to take your knowledge to the next level. And then we're also going to do some case study. So on the last episode of GPT's Anatomy, hopefully you guys like that little reference still. We talked about these things last week. Custom GPTs are used for narrow use cases. AI cannot solve problems that are too broad. So the idea that AI is going to fully create content on its own is still too broad of an idea. People who are trying to sell you that they already have a solution to that, it's usually a whole lot of cap. And I can just tell you that because I've seen the most advanced demos already. Number two, the most important skill you need to work with all AI systems today and for the next 2 years is you need the ability to be a strong writer, because plain English is now a coding language. Number three, you don't need to learn how to code, but you need to have the ability to think like a developer. And so you may want to consider rewatching the first class where I go over mental models and why those are so important. Number four, there's a very important concept called system level prompts. A lot of times you see a lot of people sharing, these are the 37 best prompts you need to use and write it out this way. And then you're going to write this super crazy long prompt. And you're still going to notice that, especially with ChatGPT, the quality is going to keep getting lower and lower and lower because of scaling constraints. System level prompts are a great way to access long-term memory. And if you just understand that one concept that we talked about in the last class, that will then help all your ChatGPT conversations because you will be able to write custom instructions. Custom instructions are when you tell ChatGPT exactly how you want to receive your answers. And then based on that feature, that was the impetus for the feature called GPTs. And so everything ties back to writing. And then, the next thing is that for all AI systems you work with in the future, even if you're working with the Claude console, you're working with, let's say, a Perplexity Pro account, they're all going to be talking to you about system level prompts. So go back to class 3 if you can, and you can relearn that concept. And it's all just about writing and explaining instructions, goals, and context. And the real value of a custom GPT is not creating one custom GPT. Like in the Moderna case, they made 400 custom GPTs. And one of the big value props is that in a single conversation, you can at a GPT. And that's very similar to if you've ever used Slack and you at someone in Slack, it's the same idea, except now you're adding a bot. And then that bot is going to answer you, and it's trained on a very small niche thing, but then you can weave a bunch of bots into a conversation and move through a workflow. And I demoed that in the previous class, so go back to the previous class and check that out if you want to get a refresher on that. And lastly, I mentioned the goal of a custom GPT is to be able to multiply yourself. Really, what you want to be able to do is create custom GPTs that are going to be 80% of what you would be able to create. And the reason why that's a good measurement is that then you want to apply a layer of business strategy, where the next idea would be if you create a bunch of custom GPTs that can handle your marketing, that can handle customer communications, that would be able to handle any advanced cases inside of your business, then you would be able to empower a virtual assistant who can then use all of those GPTs, and you can create procedures for how that real person can then multiply their value. Because one of the big challenges that businesses have is that good quality help is very expensive, right? If you wanted someone who could truly have all of those skill sets in today's market, that may cost you more than $40 an hour. If you create a suite of custom GPTs, you would then be able to have one virtual assistant or a team of virtual assistants that can operate at the level of super autonomous, super highly qualified people who normally cost 5 times the price. And now, for you getting your business off the ground, that enables you to offload things off your plate so you can get more time back and focus on things that are important for your business. So that's the big idea behind GPTs. That's why I think that they're so important. We also talked about, well, why should you build a GPT when there are other tools that enable you today? And the reason why is that everything is going to be accelerating rapidly. At the very beginning of the course, one of the impetuses of me designing the course the way that I did was I saw a presentation from one of the top venture capital firms, and I saw a new tool that was coming down the pipe from Zapier. And so I wanted to make sure that this course was going to enable you guys to get the full value of a tool like that, that normally would have been too technically advanced for you, but now you'll have all the prerequisite knowledge to take advantage of it. And last Wednesday, it finally was released to the general public. I'm going to show that later in today's class. Now, the next thing is that these simple copy paste prompts are not enough. Because number one, ChatGPT's quality is going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And the other thing is that it's all about workflow. It's not just about a single prompt because you want to get real work done. It's about workflows. And GPTs were the easiest way for you to step into that for where you're at right now. So that's why it was so important. And then at the end of knowing this, you have all the prerequisite knowledge that you need. So quick refreshers before we actually get into the content itself. GPTs should be for a very, very narrow use case. You should not have a marketing GPT. You should have a cold email writing GPT. The more narrow, the better. And the reason behind it is that GPTs, the feature from ChatGPT, it just isn't, it's not that strong. It's not because of where AI is today. AI, as I mentioned a couple classes ago, only has the ability to solve super narrow problems that are very, very defined. And so we want to go for the most narrow tags, for the most narrow things you can do. So this is a cold email writer. This one is specifically for using Etsy and analyzing trends on Etsy. This one is specifically for creating alt tags for images. Now, for small business owners, it gets to be hard because a lot of the things you're doing aren't too into the weeds, they're kind of broad. And so that's why we're going to talk about some business strategy before we get into this content as well. The one skill that you really need is you need to be able to write clear prompts. This is taken directly from the documentation from Claude. Claude currently has the strongest model available today. Their Claude Opus model, significantly better than GPT-4 Turbo. And here's what they say. When crafting your prompts, follow the golden rule of clear prompting. Show your prompt to a friend or colleague and ask them to follow the instructions themselves to see if they can produce the exact result you want. If your friend is confused, AI will likely be confused as well. And if you go back to last week's class, there's a whole section where we go into talking about a developer concept called test-driven development. I highly recommend going back and giving that a rewatch to understand more about what I'm talking about here and how to consistently get good prompts. Because I used ChatGPT today to make, I had 2 websites to make. And then last night I made a whole application last night, which I was really proud of myself for. But one of the things that really enables me that you're going to see today when we create the knowledge base is training and fine-tuning the model yourself a little bit, because the model is just a mathematical representation of language. It doesn't actually know or understand anything. And we actually do talk a little bit about how the algorithm was designed in last week's class as well. So now a refresher on the anatomy of a GPT. A GPT has these things, and what we see in bold are your leverage points. So a GPT has a name, it has a description, but it also has this thing called instructions. This is very high leverage, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how to think about algorithms today, because algorithms are really just instructions. Then the next thing we have are knowledge bases. This is when we train the model, we fine tune it. It is a little bit similar to the test-driven development idea, but it's not fully that. We then have a user experience feature for conversation starters. We have tools that are baked in. These are tools where it can search the internet, where it can write code, and tools where it can generate images, like we used last week in the example where we created a GPT that took a regular picture and turned it into a replica of that picture using Dolly, which I thought was pretty cool. And then lastly, we have actions. This is the very high leverage point in your business, because this is when ChatGPT steps out of being in the web browser and starts talking to your business systems, whether that is your database, if you're using HubSpot, Salesforce, or maybe you're using Notion as a database. You may be using a project management system like Asana or Trello, or one of the many other project management tools. I use ClickUp. You'd be able to connect it to something like that. You'd also be able to connect it to the entire Google Suite. And so many times, a lot of people use Google Sheets, they use Google Docs, and they use Gmail. You'd be able to integrate directly into that as well. That's really the payoff point. And this is a concept called business process automation. So a lot of the things that take you a lot of time in your business, and you're like, I'm the only person that can do it, that's when we get those types of tasks off your plate, is when we combine all of this stuff of good instructions, a good knowledge base, and then connecting to those APIs that we talked about for the last 2 weeks into this. So that's really the payoff point. And then I'm actually going to show you how, we're going to create a GPT the very unnecessarily hard way today. And then at the end of class, I'm actually going to show you how you're going to be able to use a different application and create one of these in a matter of maybe 30 minutes to an hour, or be able to just hire someone for not too much money, maybe just a couple $100, to make something like this for you. But now that you have this level of understanding, you are going to be able to successfully know what to ask for them to create. And this is going to make your life a lot easier. System level prompts. This is the important thing that I told you guys about in the beginning. The goal of a system level prompt, it's the long-term memory of the conversation. This is where you want to define goals, roles, and context. The system level prompts is the inspiration for custom instructions. So if you remember class 1, where I talk about reasoning based on first principles, if you understand this concept, creating GPTs or working with any new AI system where you have to write instructions, you'll be able to reason about it a lot better if you go back to the last class and understand what system level prompts are, so you can reason based on those first principles. Now, custom instructions, they were such a popular feature that's why they made GPTs. But remember, GPTs are very weak, because the dirty secret about software companies is that they make a lot of products, but once the product goes out, they don't continue improving it. A lot of times they just get a little bit worse. And so it's just something to keep in mind for when you're adopting software. The point is that you can't afford to be left behind, but also at the same time, you still have to know when you should use something versus when you shouldn't. Okay? And then the last thing I mentioned here was you want to weave GPTs together in a single thread. And I'm just going to do a quick demo of that. So here's the idea. I've been having this conversation with this cold email campaign. And now if I add another GPT and I just say, summarize what you just said. I have to turn these transcriptions off because Zoom has one of the worst UIs ever. So just give me a second to turn those off. Yes. Okay, I don't see this, so I'm just gonna hit enter without seeing what it says. And now in this conversation I'm having with another custom GPT, I just added another GPT in this conversation. And now I might be able to even come in here and then add another GPT if I wanted to, where I might come in and say, write a custom hook as if this was a piece of content. And now I just added a new G. So now we're adding multiple people to the chat. And because they're all specially trained on something, now we see we're like, oh, wow, this is pretty good. And we get all these things in the conversation. So that's one of the big features that I think is extremely important, is weaving them into a conversation. Same way that you have multiple people in a team meeting. So a recap of what we covered last week. We use GPTs only for narrow use cases because right now we only have narrow AI. We do not have something that can do something broad like creating a whole piece of content. Anyone who's trying to sell you on that dream is likely lying. Number two, the most important skill you need is the ability to be a super strong writer. The better writer you are, the better instructions you're going to write, and the better instructions that you're able to write, the better quality results you're going to get from all AI systems, because everything works based on prompts. Number three, we want to think like a developer. You don't need to know how to code, but you should understand how developers are thinking, because a lot of times people are creating all of these features, and then when you want to use them, you might be left behind because the documentation may not be friendly, or they may not explain certain concepts. And so you're stuck using this tool, at a very small level. Like even that one thing that I just demoed to you guys, none of the ChatGPT influencers are talking about how to use that tool in business. And there's a reason why, right? There's a very big knowledge gap between developers who use this and just regular users. For system level prompts, if you really understand that concept, you'll understand where a lot of these new features are going. And if you can craft a very good system level prompt, that will then enable you to then create really good AI tools for yourself. A lot of the value from custom GPTs doesn't come from the fact that you made one. It comes from the fact that you've made maybe 20 or 30 of them, all for different purposes in your business. So like the example I said, there's one that is going to be responsible for writing a cold email, one that's going to be responsible for writing a hook for a piece of content, another one that is going to be responsible for reformatting a blog that I wrote. And hold on. It looks like I'm in charge of also letting everyone into the meeting right now as well. So I have to do that, and that is a little bit hard for me to do.
Hi,
Looks like,
Jai. This
yeah.
is Diane. If you want to if you can make me co-host, I can help you let people in.
Well, yeah, thank you for doing that. Let's see if that's possible. Yeah. Well, then Diane, for everyone, just make sure that anyone who comes into the meeting, just have them include their actual name before they join. I appreciate you so much. Um,
Not a problem.
all right. So the big value is weaving everything into a single thread. And then lastly, the big idea here, it's not that AI is just going to solve all your problems. Like, oh, these 37 prompts are going to save you 17 hours a week. Like, I can't stand seeing those things. Instead, it's about real business strategy of saying, okay, you have a set number of hours every week. You also have a set budget of what you can do. Based on those constraints, we want to take a look at software tools, at AI tools, and strategies that we can use to enable you, the small business owner, to amplify the impact of your business and how far you can stretch a dollar. We're going to talk a little bit about the business use cases next, which is why I mentioned all of that, but that was the prerequisite knowledge. So now let's talk about custom GPT use cases for your business, okay? So custom GPT use cases for your business are, number one, we're going to talk about where in your business do you need help. I'll give you a little framework for thinking about that. Then ways that you can solve each bottleneck in a systematic way. This is kind of how a developer thinks, right? And this comes back to that idea of thinking like a developer. And then in a later example, I have a pretty good Instagram example that I think a lot of people are going to appreciate. And so we'll talk about when to GPT and when not to GPT. So the way that I break it down, I always like to break things down into buckets. And this is how developers think. Like when you're in your business, you're doing so many different things throughout the week, but it's very hard because then you think you're doing everything. And then if you think you're doing everything, how do you actually get help? Well, the way you do that is by categorizing what you're doing in your business. So here's how I think about it. Every business has a need to draw people in. This a lot of times is known as lead generation. How do I get people interested to come into my store? I can't guarantee they're going to buy anything, but I want to make sure that if I have a storefront, that people are going to, number one, I'm going to pick the right place for my storefront, and two, I'm going to at least get people to get in the door. So that's the first area. I say drawing people in. The second area of business is getting people to pay you. Now, whether you have a product business or a service business, you still have a sales cycle. That's going to vary based on the pricing of your product. Like, if you have a product like you're selling waffles at a restaurant, that has a short sales cycle, just a couple of minutes. But if you have another product, let's say you have a coaching business, you still have this area to solve for. But if you have people in a coaching business, you likely might be charging, let's say, a couple $1,000s for a container, which is the most popular coaching business model to do. And that's the best way to get people into an appropriate coaching agreement. So there's going to be a sales cycle, and you're going to need to manage the sales cycle differently. Sometimes if the pricing of something's pretty high, like let's say you go to a car dealership, yeah, you go into the car dealership, it's a physical space, but you may go to other car dealerships and then come back. So they have a sales cycle for how you go through a test drive, scheduling the meeting, having a sales rep there. For other business models, that may not be necessary. For digital business models, you may again have a similar process there as well, where you may have people sign up for a free consultation first because they need to be educated and qualified as a lead. So that's why I put things into that next bucket. It's everything that happens from the time that they walk into your storefront, they go on your website, or they visit your social media profile. Maybe they see your digital storefront, which is your Instagram profile, and all the steps between that, and then giving you their credit card information. The number three thing is then service delivery or product delivery. Sometimes you're able to just give them the waffles on the spot because that has a much shorter sales cycle. But for something that might be a little bit bigger, let's say, someone got a Tesla Cybertruck. Well, that actually has a delivery cycle. Maybe you get it today, but it doesn't come for 9 months. And so you then have to deliver what it is that you gave them. Or maybe you sold them a service that you have to repeatedly give them, like anyone who has a nanny service, or you have a lawn care service. There's repeated delivery. And so we want to put things into that bucket and say, this is the part of my business where I deliver things and I deliver the core service that I give. Area number 4, in my opinion, is the paperwork and the systems. That's the back end, as developers call it, and keeping that as efficient as possible. And then I keep a 5th area as well, which is, and this is the one that gives you pricing power. This is the one that also gives you longevity. This is your ability to stay ahead, your differentiating factor. So every time I look at a business, no matter what it is, product or service, I'll categorize what are all the tasks that happen in the business and put them into one of these 5 categories. When you organize information like that, you can hire help accordingly and effectively, and you can get software tools and systems according based to this. Because a lot of times people end up overspending on software that doesn't actually solve all their problems. And then they're left with just a little bit of money, but all these other problems remain. And so this is why that developer concept of putting things into bucket can be so helpful even in other areas of life like business. And so, you know, if I was to actually use business terms, I would say, the first is lead generation. The next one is optimizing your close rate, for based on how many people walk into your storefront, how many of them are you actually closing? This is when we start taking a look at metrics. And then we start to benchmark these metrics and say, well, which areas do I need to turn the dial up? Which areas is the dial just fine? And that tells you where to put your focus and your energy. And this is very helpful because this will then tell you, oh, this is where I should be using software. This is where I need to hire a person, or this is where I need to upskill. The next thing is going to be the efficiency of delivering a service and your net promoter score. Also, customer satisfaction is another way to look at it. So that can be measured by Google reviews. That can be measured by the number of testimonials you have. That could also be measured by the number of referrals that you have in your business and having a computation of something known as your churn rate. So once we start doing this, we can take higher leverage actions when we understand the category and the associated ways to measure it. Then we have back-end systems, which these are measured based on time and money. And then we have a core differentiator, which is really going to be the way I like to think about the core differentiator is it's your zone of genius. And how much of your week are you spending in your zone of genius versus how much time are you just kind of working in the business, just handling these other 4 areas and making sure that you have enough time to turn the dial up on this, because the more time you spend here, likely the more time you have to actually innovate and then stay ahead of the competition and continue to be ready for what's to come. So hopefully that's clicking with you guys. And so when you think about where in your business that you need help and where GPT might help you, or whether just hiring someone is going to help you, I ask myself these 5 questions. Do I have consistent demand every month? Do I have predictable revenue? Can I consistently deliver quality service or product even when I'm not there? Do I have the right balance between working in the business versus working on the business? And am I spending enough time in my zone of genius? And when I ask myself these 5 questions, things become a lot easier, because a lot of times you may over focus on thinking about a lot of things that really don't move the needle when you could actually be shipping and getting things done. So I invite you to ask yourself these 5 questions and think about, well, of these 5 areas, where am I doing well? Where could I be doing better? Where am I a little bit in the danger zone? And then think, which area do I really need to get help in? And that's going to give you a great starting point for knowing where to create an effective GPT. So we'll do a little case study, because I know taking in these concepts can be a little bit challenging. And so we'll pick the first example of, am I able to have consistent demand every month? And so now as a developer, I'm going to continue to think like, well, if I'm trying to solve for this problem, what are all the different ways that I can solve this problem? Well, if I need to reach out and get new leads, well, what are the different ways that I can do it? And I love using these 2x2 matrices. This is really popularized by President Eisenhower. He had the Eisenhower matrix. And the core idea was, is it important and is it urgent? And based on that, he would take the appropriate action based on where something fell into the quadrants. In mathematics, this is actually based on a real mathematic concept called an eigenvector when you deal with a multidimensional problem. And your business is a multidimensional problem. So the way I break it down, you don't have to break it down this way. You break it down however makes sense to you. But I'll think, okay, well, if I need to get people into my business, I can either send a message out publicly or I can send a message out privately. And I can choose to reach out to people that I know, or I could reach out to strangers. And now this tells me that I can pull 4 levers for consistently getting leads into my business. I can choose to, one, do something called warm outreach. And that's when I take a look at my phone book, I take a look at my email contacts, I take a look at all my followers on Instagram or all my friends on Facebook, all my connections on LinkedIn. Or if you have a newsletter, all the subscribers to your newsletter, which is why they always recommend businesses have newsletters, because then that helps with warm outreach. And so now, if you're reaching out to people who already know you, you can do that privately, and there's a lot less friction to get that person to buy something from you or to refer someone to you. Now, another thing I could do is something called cold outreach. I can cold call people, or I can cold email people. This is one of my big specialties. What I like about this is that when I reach out to strangers, rather than me reaching out to people I know that could buy from me, realistically, for the product that I have, maybe I have less than 20 people, which is a great starting point, but it's not going to be consistent. If I need a consistent system, I'm going to say, hey, I want to reach out to strangers privately on a regular basis because that is free to do for me. And I would use cold outreach. Now, other things you can do if you want to reach out publicly to people you know, that's content marketing. That's posting on LinkedIn, posting on Facebook, posting on Instagram. Technically, that also does tap into, a newsletter as well. So you see like a little bit of a double dip there. And so that's a form of content marketing. And then lastly, if I want to send a public message to a bunch of strangers, I can do something called paid advertising. Now, the one that I'm going to choose to use in this case study is cold outreach. And the reason why is that the price of paid advertising on Facebook has gone up exponentially. Paid advertising to get a lead now costs somewhere between $12 to $20 per lead. And just because you get a lead into your business doesn't mean that you close them, right? It may take you 5 to 10 leads in order to close someone. So now your cost to acquire a customer might be $100, might be $200, or even more, depending on how efficient your sales cycle is. That's something that I can't afford right now, because if it's going to cost me $200 to get a customer and I need to get 10 customers every month, that means that I might need to spend $2,000 every month. And I'm like, if I have $2,000, I think I could spend it somewhere else a lot better. Content marketing is always a great idea too, but I'm limited to, number one, the people who follow me, and then the algorithms are already throttling my reach as well. So they want to force me to use paid ads. So now I could use content marketing, but maybe, 50% of my followers might see it in a timely manner, and all my followers may not be qualified leads anyway. So that makes it hard. So that's why I'm going to pick cold outreach, because I can pre-qualify who I'm reaching out to, and I can scale the system out into the thousands. And so now let's talk about how I would design a GPT to help me with cold outreach. And the core focus area is going to be focusing on the instructions, designing something called a knowledge base, which will fine-tune the model just a little bit. And then we'll talk about what actions are going to look like. I didn't have enough time to write an actual server and integrate it with the actual business machines. And also, because I know that there's better ways to do it, I didn't want to spend like an hour writing a server just for a demo example. So for instructions, that's the first area that we want to focus on for my case study. And the 4 things I'm going to think about here, number 1, it's going to be algorithms. And so algorithm might be a term that you may not know, or you may know it and you may have the wrong knowledge about what those actually are. So I'm going to tell you what an algorithm is. And there's a really cool history behind it. Algorithms are actually 1,200 years old, and they're innately human. I'm going to teach you that example. Then I'm going to show you the power of clear writing, writing exercises, and then how I would think like a developer to solve this problem. So first and foremost, I'm going to now get into a little bit of entertainment here, and we're going to learn about the history of algorithms.
We think of an algorithm as something new, but the term actually dates back about 900 years. The word algorithm comes from the name of a Persian mathematical genius, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. He was born around 780 AD in the region now known as Uzbekistan. His name suggests he came from Khwarizma. Known as al-Khwarizmi, he was director in the House of Wisdom, an intellectual centre for scholars in 9th century Baghdad. He made innovative contributions to mathematics, astronomy, geography and cartography, and wrote an influential book called Concerning the Hindu Art of Reckoning. 300 years later, the book was rediscovered and translated into Latin. It introduced Hindu Arabic numerals to the West, which eventually replaced the unwieldy Roman ones. The Hindu Arabic number system, along with the decimal point, both described by al-Khwarizmi in his book, are the basis of the numbers we use throughout the world today. Al-Khwarizmi's name, when Latinized in the title of the book, became algorithmi, and this is the origin of the word algorithm. We also have al-Khwarizmi to thank for the word algebra, which comes from another of his works. His books revolutionized mathematics in the West, showing how complex problems could be broken down into simpler parts and solved. In medieval Latin, algorithmus simply meant the decimal number system. By the 13th century, it had become an English word and was used, for example, by Chaucer. But it wasn't until the late 19th century that algorithm came to mean a set of step-by-step rules for solving a problem. In the early part of the 20th century, Alan Turing, the British mathematician and computer scientist, worked out how, in theory, a machine could follow algorithmic instructions and solve complex mathematics. This was the birth of the computer age. During World War II, he built a machine called the bomb, which used algorithms to crack the Enigma code. Today, algorithm is a fairly common term, even if sometimes we are not exactly sure what an algorithm does. Algorithms are everywhere now, helping us to get from A to B, driving internet searches, making recommendations of things for us to buy, watch or share, and predicting how we vote or who we fall in love with. This little word that originated in medieval Persia is gradually transforming our lives.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to receive notifications.
Pretty cool, right? And so the core message of this video that I wanted you to get is that algorithms are innately human. And the original idea was that it's a set of steps that humans perform. So if I was to create a cold outreach algorithm for myself, here's how I would do it. Number one, I would find a lead source. A lead source just means a place that I can go to where my customers all are, that I would then be able to look them up in some kind of directory. Many times, and that's really the business value of a tool like LinkedIn. But you'd also be able to use other niches, like, let's say if you're in a niche, like you're a health coach. A good example of this might be going to relevant communities where your target persona may be. And whether that is going to be someone who, and let's use an example. Oh, Seema wants to use real estate. I'll get into real estate in a second, Seema. Or actually, I'll do your real estate example right now, Seema. So a great example for you is that you have local influencers. So although I love New York City, I live in Jersey City, right? Because I was working a tech job and I needed to make sure that I had something that was going to have consistent electricity and not too much noise. And I just don't trust Con Edison. So I decided to move here because I knew the internet was going to be more reliable and that my apartment would not like have sudden issues. But over here, there's a big local influencer called Hoboken Girl. And so that would be a great place to then be like, oh, well, if I know that my target audience are going to be people who are new to the area or people looking to kind of be active in and around the area for real estate, that's a good local lead source because she has a super great engaged audience. And so if we were to go look at her Facebook group or we were to go look at one of her other digital assets, that would be a great place for you to go take a look at leads. So that's step one, find a source where the person who's actually going to buy your product is. And it has to be the person who actually makes the purchasing decision. That's how I think about it, at least. I don't want to have the end user. I want to have the economic buyer. Number two, I then want to do research about the lead because there's nothing worse. Well, no, there's a whole lot of things worse, especially going on today than this. But I really don't like it when I get a random message that is not personalized. And I'm just like, you couldn't even take the time to write me a message. Like, why would I do business with you? So the next thing I would want to do is do lead research. So I may want to go learn a little bit more about the person. Maybe I'm going to say, okay, well, here are these people in the lead source. And then maybe I'm going to take inventory of all the people who recently joined and then maybe posted a question. And then I have a good reason to reach out because I see, oh, that person just posted in the group. That means they're from the area. They're looking for some kind of help. And now I can do something to open that relationship because I know something about them and I have a reason for me to talk to them, right? Very similar to like a face-to-face conversation at a networking event. You may see someone and you might be like, oh, hey, I noticed this about you. And you can then walk up to them rather than just walk up to them and be like, hey, can I tell you about the da-da-da-da-da? And then the person's gonna be like, oh, well, get away from me right now. Then number three is I want to organize that information into a database. A spreadsheet, Google Sheets is really just a database for normal people. But, if I want it to be more sophisticated, I may use a tool like HubSpot or Salesforce. And then the last thing I'll do is I'm not just going to reach out to the person, but I'm going to personalize the email to reach out to them. And so when I do that, I know the great thing about me doing this is that now I can reach out to maybe 2,000 people every month. And when I reach out to 2,000 people every month, if I was to compare that to a paid ad, that might actually cost me $40,000 a month to do. And so now I get $40,000 worth of value for this one very simple type of campaign. Seema's asking a follow-up question. What would be the best place to approach them if you can't find their email? Well, Seema, this is when you want to use tools for lead enrichment. And that's out of the scope of this presentation, but definitely look into what lead enrichment is all about. Another thing you can do is you want to find the appropriate platform, right? So depending on where you are, sometimes even the DMs on Instagram is a great place to do it, depending on how you do it. It's a lot of it is going to be about the how, but that actually gets into like a whole sales thing. But I know a lot about sales systems, and that's actually before I was an engineer, I was a seller, and I was a President's Club seller, meaning like I was top of the sales floor for a long period of time. So and before I actually got into being an engineer, I was designing go-to-market strategy for all these different startups, depending on who their audience was, finding leads, and then and that was the big problem we had as startups. We didn't have money for ads. We didn't have money for field marketing. We didn't have money. We didn't have connections with warm outreach. So we had to use cold outreach in order to reach revenue targets so that we could go raise money. So this is one of my specialties. So if you want, you can shoot me an email, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about it on there. So that's how I would think about an actual algorithm for how I would go about my process. And now the next thing that I want to get into, right? Because I mentioned that I was going to cover, the main things for instruction. So number one is like, how would I think about algorithms for this process? And what's the step-by-step process I would take? And so you just saw the step-by-step process I would take for cold outreach in the example that I gave. Now we're going to get to clear writing, and I'm just going to pop out and pop back in for a second, just because they have that automatic play, which I really don't like. So there's a technique known as metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. And this is something that a lot of developers innately do. So a lot of times when I'm doing something that is very ambiguous, it could be goal setting, or it could be refining some of my very tough ideas that would make for great content, right? Because if I'm thinking about creating a new course, I may want to go through an exercise like this. Or let's say you're someone like Anna and you have, let's say, a specialized coaching business that you're looking to get into, and you're really thinking about, well, you have your niche, but what's going to really make you different? You can go through an exercise like this to really clear and clarify your thoughts for all these golden nuggets that you have in your mind that you got from years and years of your practice and your certification. And so what I'll usually do is I just go through this algorithm of a writing exercise. And a lot of times, and what I've now done is I program this into ChatGPT, where I have ChatGPT in a loop go through my thought exercise so that it clears up its own thoughts, and then I get a really good answer at the end. So it gets really meta like that. But I ask myself, what question am I answering? Why is this question important? I break the original question down into atomic questions. I force myself to answer each question using only simple words. And then for each answer to the simple question, I ask myself, what would someone who disagrees say? And then I refute the rebuttal. And this is a really good 20-minute exercise. You don't want to stretch this out longer than you need to, otherwise it just turns into procrastination. But I'll show you what I really like about it. And I'll make sure to increase the font size, because I know that people mentioned that in the previous class. And so let's see if I can increase the font size. Give me 1 second, because I don't know how to do it inside of this application. Okay, zoom in. So it is, there we go. Okay, figured out the short key. So when I ask myself, well, what question am I answering? It's like I'm making a personalization, an email personalization GPT, right? So that's my goal. So the question I'm going to ask myself is, well, how do I personalize emails? That's the first step in the process. Then I'll ask myself a follow-up question. Well, why is this question important? And I'll say, well, personalized emails are important for running successful outbound sales development campaigns. A strong cold email can generate hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of value with no upfront cost. Compare that to advertising, where the lead cost is $12 to $20, and getting a lead to convert to a customer might cost $100 or more. But you can spend thousands of dollars on an ad and it might not work. But cold emails cost no money and generate thousands of dollars when done correctly. And if you notice, that is exactly what I mentioned a couple minutes ago. And because I went through this exercise, I was able to clearly articulate a concept that was outside of this class in the simplest way I could. Now, the next thing I do after going through that process is I break down my original question into smaller atomic questions. And so I'll say, all right, well, first and foremost, what is a personalized email? And what is my method for doing it? And then if I say things inside of here that are a little bit too ambiguous, I force myself to simplify even further. And this helps me clear my thinking, because remember, as the Claude documentation said, you cannot get good value from Claude without clear prompting. And so this is why I go through the process. And so then I break down the answers to these, and then I break down my answers to, if I say other things, like when I say, what's my method for it? I say, well, my method for personalized emails is to keep them short, to complement them, mention the benefits, not features of my product, and leave them wanting more. And then I'll force myself to be like, all right, well, what does leave them wanting more mean? Because large language model doesn't understand what that is. Only I do. And so then I'll define what that means. I say leaving them wanting more means that they click the links in my email and take the actions I suggest in the call to action. And now again, I introduce a defined concept that may confuse the large language model again. So I force myself to then break that down and answer what a call to action is. Then I give a refute for each of these, and then I answer each refute. And when I go through this process, the reason why I go through this process is that it enables me to write clear instructions for the model. Because as we saw last week in the example where we made the custom GPT that was able to take, and actually, why don't I demo that real quick? In last week's class, we created a really strong I think it was a very strong GPT. You guys let me know if you thought it was any good. But we made this GPT where you could just drop in an image. So if I was to drop in an image, let me find a good one. Sometimes it might be able to use it, sometimes it won't.
all the time you get sick.
I think someone needs to go on mute unless they were talking to me. So notice how all this stuff is happening. So I just input an image, and now it's algorithmically breaking down this image, which we programmed into last week's class. I'll go over the directions again, just to go over the example. It could potentially fail on this, just because I don't know if it has rules around people, and sometimes there's a misinterpretation. So we'll see, because I know we failed on the Panther example last week. Oh, wow. So look at that. And so the goal of the GPT was we input an image, and then we get a dolly version of the image that is near similar to that. And this actually worked. And I actually like this. This is really cool, actually. I'm going to send this to my mom later. I think
I
she'll
like the colors better.
Yeah, I do too. So the instructions for this, remember, we went pretty ham on these instructions. And so we went and we defined all the steps. And so like we said, hey, this is step one, but then we forced the model to use that technique that I mentioned a couple classes ago called chain of thought, so that it outputs its own thinking process, so that we then, because ChatGPT is so weak that you need to use some techniques like that. And then we tell it the exact format. So this is called output parsing. We force it to do that as well. We then give it all these different steps on what to do. And then a lot of times we re-mention the same rule over and over and over again, just because GPTs are weak and you do need to tell it to do the same thing 4 or 5 times. But notice how this is a lot of instructions, and we told it to do a lot of different steps so that we can get this image to be created properly. And we also forced it to extract so many different data points out. Like if we take a look at this example, if I was to come back 1 second. When we go to take a look at this example right here, we're asking it, hey, well, what's the format of the image? Is it landscape or portrait? What is the perspective or viewpoint of the image? What is the mood of the image? And then force it to then create tags for that. What is the style of the image? How would it describe the image? What's in the background? Force it to pick out something unusual in the scene of the image. What are the dominated textures of the image? What are the dominated colors? Are there any aberrations? Do we need to think about skin color? Do we need to think about cultural references? Do we need to think about context or context of the text or text style if it is included? Do we need to think about the image quality of how it is? Is the entire image filled? Yes or no? Is the central part of the image filled? Is it a flat design? And then and then it goes through that entire process of then recreating it. So this is this isn't that goes back to an algorithm. Now, if we were to do that in code, it would be a lot harder, but we did that all in plain English, and we were able to then, create something like this with no coding experience. So that comes back to thinking like a developer. We want to think through all the things that are very important. And that comes to that idea I mentioned last week of creating the test cases for what makes a good example versus what makes a bad example. And this gets really important when we design something called a knowledge base. And so I'm going to show you a GPT that I created for the cold outreach, but first I'm going to show you the lead list. And first I'm going to make sure to try to hide all of that because I don't want to expose leads. But what I do is I create an initial set of 8 examples of what a cold email would be based on data about someone in my lead list. And remember, this is something known as a few shot prompting. You really need somewhere between 5 to 25 examples for this to get working and going quite well. And so in this example, I think I only did 7 because I was just feeling lazy, and this does take time to do, right? You have to do the initial work. And then I provide a full explanation, and I make sure that I give it good examples, bad examples, and midway examples inside of here. By doing that, by making sure that I put all these different types of examples in, that then helps with the pattern matching part of this. And remember, I mentioned that ChatGPT, it doesn't understand anything you're saying. It just has an algorithm to predict the next likely words in a sequence and the ability to recognize patterns. And so based on that, I went and designed a custom GPT for myself so that I could cold email. I'm not going to cold email a couple thousand people a month, but my assistant is. And this is something that if I wanted to hire someone in the US to do this, this would cost me anywhere from $50 to $200 an hour to do based on whether I'm commissioning the person or not. And now I'm going to get the same high quality close rate as if I was trying to close all these people from cold email myself. And I also am going to get the value of when I built out the entire system, so multiple different AI systems to do it. But this would have cost me $20,000 a month to do if I was going to do paid ads. If I was to, buy a lead list, just getting the lead list would cost me $5,000. Right. And now I'm able to just kind of do that entirely for free for myself. And that is now going to give me the ability to hire in other places for my business and focus on other places in my business as well. And so when I go through the process and I put this into the Amplified Intelligence community for how to go about writing the instructions. But first, I write the instructions and I do a step-by-step process where I tell it what step 1 is going to be. Then I force it to use that technique that I've been talking about a couple times, which is the chain of thought reasoning, where you force ChatGPT to use more resources so that you'll actually get a good quality answer, because the quality of ChatGPT is just going to keep getting worse. And so by using techniques like chain of thought prompting, that forces the model to spend more time. And when it spends more time, you get a higher quality answer. And then I give it more and more steps. And then I also give it a context. Who is it? What is it doing? Then I give it a set of goals. What is it going to do? I give it a style and a personality. And then I tell it what things it should keep in mind when it is writing. And then I give it an audience. And then I also give it a set of uploaded files. And so when I give it these uploaded files, it is then going to read based on that. And it's able to then write cold emails, which then I'll use the team plan on ChatGPT and just give my virtual assistant access to this. My virtual assistant will be able to reach out to a couple hundred people every single week, qualify these leads, get them interested, get them, get a lot of traffic to my website, get a lot of people to hopefully then join my marketing funnel. And then, maybe a dozen people every week are going to end up being pretty hot leads. And then I'll have my assistant actually book those meetings on my calendar. Meanwhile, I can do the thing that I love, my zone of genius, which is teaching. While I'm very good at the sales part, but I don't want to spend my time on that area. So I'm going to spend probably 5 hours a week on sales, but I'm going to consistently build this process out. So just kind of showing you like a little sneak behind the curtains there on what that process actually looks like. And so that was the GPT creation case study where I said, hey, I want to focus on one problem in my business from the 5 areas that we talked about. And I decided, hey, granted, I started this business. Actually, technically, it's kind of funny. I would almost say that Bhavna started this business because I was so fed up with tech. And then she's just like, no, just teach it and then do something with it. And like she said it over and over and over again. And I was like, fine, I'll do it. And then I started this probably 4 weeks ago. So now granted, and one of the first things I do want to think about is having consistent demand every month. That's one of the first things that I want to solve for in the business so that I'll be able to have a steady foundation for this. And so cold outreach was the idea that I had for solving that problem because I was like, paid ads are too expensive. Now you would be able to do some strategies with paid ads. Like what some people will do with the paid ad is rather than try to get someone to buy something from a paid ad, they'll direct them to a piece of content. Like they'll direct them to a YouTube video to warm the lead up. And, some people are actually able to, keep the cost per lead down to about $50 doing that. And they're able to generate 7 figures of revenue. So don't think just because I went this one route, that that's the only way to go. There's so many different ways to go solve this problem. This is just one case study that I picked. But what I had to do this was I designed instructions. I created a knowledge base, which you just saw in that Excel sheet. And then, if I wanted to, I would create actions, which would then enable my assistant to then work inside of ChatGPT, but then immediately update our CRM accordingly using a quick action. So that's kind of like the big idea between how much leverage you can get. This GPT took me a couple hours to make, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to drive me a lot of revenue for this upcoming month and help me, create a brand new, I guess, like revenue stream for the business that is actually in alignment with what I want to do, which is I just want to be creating courses, as many courses as I can, and really just drive as many people as I can to the courses. So the instructions are just a high-level algorithm in plain English. And you saw, I think about what steps would I do to solve a problem. And then I'll go force myself to do a metacognitive exercise. Metacognitive exercise is where we think about thinking. And I went through that 6-question process. So, and when I go through that process, that enables me to write really good instructions that are detailed, because the detail in the instruction matters, because a lot of times we use words, but the large language model doesn't understand what those words actually mean because it's just a mathematical representation of words. Then number 2, it's creating a knowledge base. And we want to give the model, somewhere, and granted, I say 10 to 25 here, but you can really get away with as little as 5 examples with your reasoning behind it. And then you can get much higher quality answers. And so you can go back to last week's lesson about test-driven development to learn more about it. And then actions, this is the real leverage point, is when I then link this to my actual business systems, because I can have this craft a message inside of ChatGPT, and then with a simple shortcut, have the email be sent inside the ChatGPT UI as well. Now, that's inefficient given, you know, there's a lot of better tools out there, but just know that that functionality exists. So we did a whole lot of work to get there. And even this, which drives a ton of value, but even for you, the small business owner, it's a long walk for a short drink of water. So there's got to be an easier way, right? And so this is what I've been teasing at since the very beginning of the course. Like I told you guys at the beginning of today's class, Sequoia, it's a top venture capital firm. A couple weeks ago, they were talking about everything that was coming down the pike for AI. And I saw this come down the pike. And I was like, whoa, this is really going to change the game for small business owners. And the Zapier Central, it's a new feature from Zapier. It was just released in beta last Wednesday. It's the same concept of a GPT, same exact concept. And notice when you're inside of here, it has a data source, knowledge bases, but one click of a button and you don't have to go create something. It can just pull from multiple sources. It also has instructions inside of here, just like we have instructions. But what's really cool about it is it has triggers. When things happen in your business, like in the event that you did have an ad convert on Facebook, you can then say, hey, once this action takes place, perform this step, maybe take the information that was given by the lead to then format a very good message to give to the lead, send me a message in Slack, or send a message in Slack where all my VAs are going to be. And then I can make sure that as soon as that lead comes in, that we touch the lead within 1 hour of it coming in. And, you know, it's a sales concept of, you know, if someone's coming in inbound, you want to engage them ideally in under an hour, right? Because you want to preserve the freshness of it. The longer you wait, the colder the lead gets. And now you just wasted money on all that time and effort. And so that's what makes this extremely powerful. So I'll show you guys a quick demo of it. And this is, so all the prerequisite knowledge we built up was to get you guys to, like, as these tools get released every week for the rest of this year, you guys are going to be ready to work with these tools because you have the prerequisite knowledge.
In this video, we're going to dive into a brand new product from Zapier called Zapier Central. This powerful AI workspace is designed to take your productivity and automation game to the next level across Zapier's massive ecosystem of over 6,000 apps. So what is Zapier Central? Zapier Central is a no-code tool that allows you to create, train, and interact with intelligent AI bots. Think of these bots as like mini teammates that can do a whole bunch of tasks for you, like drafting customer emails, researching new leads, analyzing data, and so much more. Using Central is incredibly easy. You do not need any coding experience. You can define what you want AI to do, connect all the apps like you do with Zapier, and the AI will understand and execute those commands when you need it. For example, you can ask your bot to become your executive assistant, analyzing your emails and surfacing the most important ones that require your response. By just saying, hey bot, tell me what emails do I need to respond today, AI will automatically analyze all your emails and surface the ones that are important to respond to. Or let's say you connect your sales data to Central, you can then instruct the bot to become your data analyst, allowing you to ask complex questions like, hey bot, how many percentage of people who have sales background have seen the demo? The AI assistant will understand the query, crunch the numbers, and get back to you with the valuable insights. Zapier Central is a major step forward in the world of no-code AI and workflow automation. By allowing users to directly interact with and teach AI bots, it opens up new realms of productivity and efficiency. Literally, you're limited by your imagination. No longer you need to handle repetitive, tedious tasks manually. Simply define the behavior you want and let your AI bot take care of the rest. So you have more time to focus on things that matter more. So if you're a Zapier user or you know someone who's a productivity nerd, Zapier Central is definitely something you want to keep your eyes on. We're going to be doing some live demos and tutorials on how to build these bots in the upcoming videos. So keep an eye out and let us know what your thoughts are on Zapier Central. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on productivity, automation, tools, and all things tech.
So I thought this was extremely powerful when I first saw it get demoed a couple months back. And I really do think that this is really, really powerful for a lot of you guys. But one of the big challenges originally with Zapier was that it's too technically dense. And so for a lot of small business owners, particularly solopreneurs, you don't have a background in tech, and so then it's like, oh, now I gotta hire a Zapier developer to do this stuff. And so it's good that they have a no-code tool, but what's also going to be very good is now that you have this prerequisite knowledge, if you know what systems you're going to design, because now you understand the value of thinking like an engineer, and you're armed with some of the mental models for how to think about it, you can give something like this a try. And, you know, this is where I say it's good to have, you know, a small AI budget to spend every month. Like, you know, put $100 aside every month just to pay for your subscriptions for AI tools. And then, you know, try to consider having somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 this year to invest in making some bets on AI. And just think about making small bets, because, you know, having someone make a system like this for you might only cost you $500. Now, granted, you'll need to actually think about how to orchestrate a system like this, but you might really be able to get a lot of leverage here. Like SEMA is a great example of something like this, right? Imagine you have an entire workflow around leads that you have from an open house, and people are signing up on it. And then as soon as they sign up inside of there, you can just automate a whole email flow. There's so many cool and different things that you can do inside of here, that I think would make it very valuable.
In this video,
So let's come back to the goal of the course. Like, why did I make this, right? I didn't make it to sell you on anything, right? I made this course because I was like, hey, I'm really worried about where small business is going to go, because I'm really scared and nervous that if small business owners don't have the prerequisite technical knowledge, then they're not going to be able to take advantage of this. And I don't think that people are going to be replaced by AI this year, but you will start being replaced by other people who are using AI. So that's why I made this course, so that you would have the prerequisite knowledge, so that as all these tools drop, you now understand certain concepts. So number one, you understand the opportunities with generative AI. You know where to focus. I've told you over and over again that prompting and those prompt templates and focusing too much on prompts isn't going to get you anywhere. If you want to make the most of AI, you want to go back to that first lecture, and you'll see all the different tools I talk about there, and this concept of agents and working on those. That's a lot better, because, you know, now prompt engineering is going to be less and less valuable. Like when GPT-5 comes out this summer, a lot of the techniques of act as this thing and da 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 da, and like, you know, having like that super long prompt that everyone is just kind of doing over and over again, it's not really going to work anymore, because it's not going to be necessary. They're going to start saying, okay, well, this isn't necessary. The puck's going to move somewhere else, and it's going to move based on the first principles I taught you. So number two here is that I really wanted you to have all the prerequisite knowledge that's required for business process automation. Because I don't think that if I labeled the course as business process automation, that we would have had the same number of signups. So that's why we called the course How to Become a Power User of ChatGPT, and show you how ChatGPT works under the hood, show you this big feature of ChatGPT, and then use it as a way to say, hey, this is just a tip of the iceberg. Now you understand the underlying concepts to use these other powerful tools and why you might use them. And then you're going to notice that these tools, what they all have in common is that they have instructions, they have a knowledge base, and they have actions. That's the thing that's going to make these tools powerful. And so now you're able to build your own custom GPT, but you're going to have a much shorter learning curve on taking advantage of advanced tools like what I just showed you as they drop throughout the year. And so thank you for your participation in the course, and you're ahead of the curve now. So like, clap it up for yourself. And we still have a little bit to go though. So if you guys want, we can do a class case study through like that business example that I gave before. Or, you know, if you guys do have some questions and you want to just get some live help, we can go either way. I can, like, the idea I had was maybe going through like a content creation example and then show you how and when I would use AI to solve the problem versus use like some of the other concepts I taught you to then get a lot of leverage. And I had an example for Instagram content creation. But I realize it's the last class and I want to give you guys like a little bit of freedom on like where to take things.
Okay, a little change of subject. I was wondering if I get your opinion on what got released today, because you went a little bit into it in the beginning.
Um, hmm. So let's make sure that. All right, so I'm gonna quickly go into Jesse's question and then we're gonna do the case study. Okay, so what got released today was this. So we have ChatGPT 4.0. But this one is a demo that really, I mean, it makes me want to fall out of my seat. They have so many different examples of how you can use voice to interact with ChatGPT. So I used ChatGPT earlier today. In real time, I was able to have it translate me speaking English to Gujarati. So now that's going to change the game for language barriers. And where I'm getting at with that, because I think more high level than that. So I'll tell you, Jesse, I'll tell you what my big fear and concern is. With what we saw get released today, I have a great fear for wages in America. I have a great fear that in maybe 6 months, language barriers are going to be gone, which is great. I love when the world is going to be able to understand each other, because right now we're killing each other because we refuse to understand each other. And that is atrocious. But on the flip side, what it means for a lot of people in America is that your wages are no longer going to be compared against your geography or your niche compared to America. Now it's going to be extremely easy for someone to communicate with someone who speaks a different language in a much lower cost locale. And so I could see the cost of a lot of things dropping exponentially, 1 to 2 orders of magnitude very quickly. And that is really going to hurt a lot of people in America because we have the highest wages in the world and we have the highest cost of living too. And a lot of businesses are immediately going to be thinking, wow, how can I replace as many people as I have here with someone in another part of the world? Because now everything's based on the internet, but it used to be, this is a side tangent before I go on, is that it used to be when you live somewhere else in the world, the quickest way to double your income overnight was to learn English. English was the #1 skill that could give you a living wage throughout the entire world. And yeah, you're right. It's been happening for years on freelance sites. But there was still a barrier. The people, and the reason why I said what I just said was because of freelance sites. Learning English gave people the ability to go on freelance sites or work at companies that were participating in offshoring, nearshoring, and business process automation. But now that's going to get even more serious. That wave is going to get even more serious. So yeah, that's a ginormous fear that I have. I can't discern how much of the demo was actually true, because we have to remember latency is an issue. And when I saw all the videos from today, they had virtually no latency. And this ties back into the theory. There was a theory that was going out. So like, there was a mysterious model that got released that OpenAI didn't claim to own. A lot of people were saying, hey, is that model actually GPT-5 in the wild right now? And, it's just a little bit of a test. Other people were actually saying what it was is, and this is a trend that maybe I'll get into I'll create a different body of work of this. A big trend we're going to see is smaller local models. So I think the next thing is not to have bigger and bigger models, but rather that we're going to have smaller and smaller models. The reason why is that latency then drops dramatically. So if you have a small model that is very well finely tuned, then you can get very fast answers. And so if in reality, what they did figure out is a way to create the model to actually be significantly smaller, have much less latency, so then you could be closer to real time. That's where things are really going to pop, because right now you'll notice if you talk to ChatGPT, it takes 1 or 2 minutes to answer. What's going to happen when it takes 5 seconds to answer? A lot. So hopefully that answers your question, Jesse.
Thank you.
All right. So, we're going to do a quick example again about this area. Atoha, a multi-agent system that was actually demoed today by by ChatGPT. That was wild. 2 voice-based GPTs were just talking to each other. One had access to a camera, and it was nuts. I'm not going to be able to cover that in tonight's class. That is a very heady subject. I'll talk about it in the I will talk about it in the Amplified Intelligence community, because I already have a multi-agent flow that I have working right now where I've given. And so the idea that Atoha is talking about is that right now you're only talking to one AI, right, at a time. I have a system where what I do is I have multiple GPTs that all have their own personalities. One is a business analyst, one is a salesperson, one is a marketing person, one writes code, one tests code, one is a product manager. And then I can have as many of them working together in concert, and then I can give them a high-level task to do. And then they all just go talk to each other. And they'll talk to each other for minutes, hours, or even days. And they'll produce a whole body of work, and it becomes a self-correcting system. I'm working on one of those right now. To solve some of my business problems. So as I create that, I'll demo that inside the community. Diane says, can you edit and update your GPT after you created it? Yes, you can. The way that happens is, hold on. These grapes are delicious. Go ahead and put them away. So what we do, come over to my GPTs, and what I do, come over to edit, and then once you've edited, you have the ability to just one click update it. What's also really cool is it has a version history. So I can see all the previous versions, and if I accidentally made a version that I don't like, I should be able to revert back to it. And that's, again, that's a developer concept of deployments. All right, so coming now back to this example. So which area would you want help in? We're going to do this example again of, do you have consistent demand every month? Because for a lot of small business owners, this is like step 1, and they usually, getting step 1 done is very hard, and a lot of people don't get past it. So in the last example, we talked about doing cold outreach. This time around, we're going to talk about doing it for content marketing. So this time around, let's design an algorithm for content creation. And so I want to share with you something, and for everyone anyone who does benefit from Instagram content creation, let me know in the chat, because then that's going to help me think about examples. So for designing an Instagram algorithm for content creation, here's what a lot of people are doing. And so I'll come over to Instagram and come over here. And so what we can do is, let's say there's an example, like let's say I'm a health coach and I'm going to focus on a niche issue of, I'm going to focus on a niche health issue. What a lot of people will then do, hold on, sometimes this doesn't work too well inside of the browser. But we can take a look at the most popular influencers, and this is an algorithm here that a lot of people talk about. And so this algorithm, basically, here's the idea. People come over to the reels of popular creators. What they'll do is they'll notice, okay, well, based on this creator, we're going to take a look at their average views, and then we're going to see which outliers they have. Based on which pieces of content are outliers, that tells you which format that you should likely follow. And so we'll notice that this creator has, I mean, doing an incredible job getting, like, 150,000 to 200,000 views every single time on a super niche issue. But notice how this one piece of content pops. And so then it's like, all right, well, what are the reasons why a piece of content may have popped? And what they'll then do is they will then use another tool like CapCut. They'll go ahead and they'll just download the actual reel itself. And then, hold on, I'll pull up CapCut in a second. Once it pops up, I'll let you know. Boo, boo, boo. Hold on 1 second. And so then so what they'll then do is they'll upload it to a tool like CapCut. And notice how this is here, but what they'll do is they'll say, hey, how many different cuts are inside of here? So they'll notice, oh, well, looks like there's 3 cuts inside of here. What they'll then do is they'll say, okay, if there's 3 cuts, I can then use the same audio, because usually a lot of times things depend on a trending piece of audio, and then they will just overlay their video and make sure that they have 3 cuts, one that ends right here at this time marker, another cut that goes this long, and then a third cut that goes over to this, to that same length. They'll keep the video the same length. They'll also recycle the audio as well, because a lot of times things depend based on audio that's succeeding. And so they'll copy a very similar format. And then they'll also notice, okay, well, one of the reasons why this may have worked is that, the core thing was written in red and directly in the center. And it's also using this very popular thing. And so now, if I was to kind of recreate my own thing, I would just say something similar, but not the same. And that's actually how the majority of content creators on Instagram are actually creating stuff. Everyone just rides a wave based on other creators. And so what you just saw is an algorithm that other creators are actually using. And if you actually go look at other people, like, who's this guy, creator? There's actually a set of just like niche people who talk about stuff like this, who then just tell you, hey, here's the exact audio that's popping right now. They tell you which pieces of audio to use, and then they also tell you what the new trends are, how the algorithm's currently working, and they just tell you, hey, you take a similar style and then you just overlay on top of CapCut. And so now that this applies that same concept of an algorithm that, hey, essentially the best creators have created this loose algorithm for how they make content. And this is what pops. Compare that to, there's a lot of other tools that claim that they're just going to create a viral piece of content for you. Or there's tools like ManyChat where they'll be like, oh, hey, now just use this tool and then have everyone comment this one thing and then everything's going to go great. Software is not usually the best answer. Sometimes a human algorithm like this works. What I just told you, like, there's people out here on Instagram who their whole course is really just that one idea, and they charge you $3,000 for that one piece of information, and they stretch it out over like 6 to 8 weeks. And that's what they're all talking about. They all just have a loose algorithm for how they make content. Other people have algorithms for how they make carousels and things like that. So that's an idea of, oh, well, that's how we would have an algorithm to create some process. And if I was to think like an engineer, what I would say is, okay, well, if you want to take that to the next level, all you need to do is you need one day where you shoot B-roll. B-roll is just like it's like extra footage that you have. You keep a library of it, and every time a trend pops up, people just hop on the wave. They use their pre-made B-roll to go on top of it, and then we can layer in we can layer something in with ChatGPT. What people actually do, there's actually a ton of GPTs for this, where there's this viral hooks generator, and they'll describe a piece of content inside of there. It'll come up with what the hook for the content should be, like what it should say in the first couple seconds. There's other small GPTs that will then write the captions for you. And then you can then make a loose system where you're not just going to have one GPT that makes your whole piece of content, but you have a high level algorithm for how to make it. And now you can consistently produce a lot of content in a very short amount of time. And extremely, you can get away with probably, spending 4 hours, one day a month to get your stills, your B-roll, and your A-roll. And then you can outsource the rest of this process. You can train a VA on how to check what the trends are, and every single week to hop on the new trend, and your content is just done for you. And that's the power of algorithms and how to think like an engineer and create a system that is going to be extremely high leverage like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Right. So the key message that I wanted you to take away from this is that everything is not going to be about a piece of software. That's cap. Like a piece of software can't solve the problem A to Z. But when you think like an engineer, you can say, well, what are the first principles of the system? Oh, well, I need content and I need a format. A format is really just an algorithm, and you can use the algorithm and the search bar in the algorithm to help you understand what's already popping. If you go to your explore page, you can then also start noticing patterns of formats that are currently working, and you can find the minimalist ones, and you'll notice like these are all simple formats. Like this guy's not spending more than 20 minutes on this, but each of these consistently performs quite well enough that this guy's making a ton of money. I guess he's made 300 grand in the last 12 months, just spending a couple minutes on this, which is, I find to be pretty wild. And then from there, you then say, okay, well, what's the tool stack that I need? So some of it is going to be in a GPT, that you're going to be able to solve this by using these various GPTs that are made. Some of this, you may want to go create your own GPT. And then other times you're then going to want to say, okay, well, other times you will want to go pay for another tool. And then you'll say, well, I also need to have other pieces of content too. And then you can play and experiment. And now you can really stretch your dollar, and you can stretch your amount of time as well. Because usually people spend hours to make a 90-second reel, and then the reel doesn't perform. Whereas a loose high-level algorithm from just observing first principles from the outside would give you a simple mechanism so that you can go ahead and create something like this, maybe put in 4 hours up front, and then get a month worth of benefit for it. And so that's a really good ROI. And I'm not just saying that to say it, like literally I got ripped off by someone. It's like so bad. I'm not sure if you've noticed, like there's this new platform called School, and it's everywhere, and they spell it with a K. But I just got totally ripped off by someone on there. And then I was like, oh no, like, what am I gonna do? And then I was like, well, why would I hire someone when I'm the engineer and I know how to do it? And then I thought about this, and it turns out my assistant's just going to be able to handle all this for me. And so give me a couple weeks, and and I'm going to be following the same process too. So I'm literally just learning and sharing as much as I can. Just because I don't want you guys getting ripped off and losing thousands of your dollars, because like that really hurt me. So let me know if you found that to be helpful, and then we can try to do more case studies or talk more about different things as well. Melissa says that was good. Very happy to hear that. I think one of the biggest challenges that I always want to share, like, big high level strategy that like drives a lot of impact, but sometimes there's a lot of prerequisite knowledge that's required, and then breaking things down into very digestible pieces as well is pretty hard. But I do know that sometimes people don't necessarily want to like go through the whole learning process. Sometimes people want to just like sit back and kind of consume it like it's a little bit of entertainment, and then if it is good, they may want to go watch it back later, or see like a more dedicated pieces of content like that. And so I'm trying to figure out my format between that. Atoha says, are you going to do more collaborations with QEDC? Your course is very valuable. Well, Atoha, if you want to do me a favor and reach out to Bhavna, reach out to Josh. I'm about to go into this super prolific season of my life where like ideally my big goal is I want to be making a new class. I want to be creating multiple classes every week. Like that's my idea of a good time. Like everyone has their own good idea of a good time. Some people, they want to sit back or relax and watch Netflix. Literally my favorite thing in the world is I love learning and then just like finding out a way to teach and connect to so many people and use it to help other people. That's from the bottom of my heart. So if you like the class, send an email to Josh, send an email to Seth, who I think is the director of QEDC, and send a message to Bhavna. Melissa says that she wants to see more case studies. So Melissa, what kind of case study would you like to see? Oh, that's so nice. That Toha says, I'll reach out to them. I will encourage others too. We need Jai. Oh, that's so nice to hear. And Melissa, if you want to come off of mute, I can just kind of come up with an example with you on the spot. Would you like to try to do that?
Okay.
All right. So Melissa, what kind of business do you have, or do you want to start?
I'm an insurance broker.
Okay.
So I want to be able to generate leads without having to always go. I do a lot of events. I go to events and I'm constantly meeting people that way. So it's kind of like I have to be at 50 million places at one time. So if I can be at home and generate leads, that would be great.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we can think about it. So we can think about lead generation in a couple of different ways. You can think about warm outreach if you already have a list of people that you've reached out to and you have a big email list already, or you have a lot of people who are already in your phone book, maybe people who might have gotten a little bit cold. That's one thing we can think of. If maybe you have a couple thousand followers on Instagram or Facebook and you want to get active with content marketing, that's another thing that you can think about. If you have a little bit of money lying around, You can always try paid advertising. I always think that it's one of the last things to work with, but also some people like Alex Hermosi, he's in a different camp. Every time he's run into a business issue, he has always used his ability to use and leverage paid ads. And because he uniquely understands how to be such a great copywriter and how advertising actually works, he's able to do that much more successfully than I can, because I hate details. That's what I love cold outreach. That's my favorite, but some people think it's yucky. So you tell me what does your target customer look like?
I hate when people ask me a target. I never had a target because I go to all kinds of events. But if you want to say targets, I guess you would say physicians. I go to a lot of medical conventions, medical conferences, things like that.
Okay, so you go after a lot of physicians
Yeah.
and you go to a lot of medical conferences, so that is great to know. And is this happening nationally? Is it happening in a particular geographic territory that you like own?
No, I don't own any territory. I do a lot in New York and New Jersey.
Okay.
So I guess it's local.
All right, so you have physicians in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
All right, great. So everyone, I'm going to tell you, so I've been saying this over and over and over again. My favorite AI agent right now is Perplexity. I love it. And so here's what I would say. Hey, I need to figure out a great lead source for my insurance brokerage. My ideal customer profile are physicians. Usually I do field marketing at medical conferences. My geographical focus is New York and New Jersey. What are going to be the best lead sources for me to generate leads? Get creative and think about field marketing, partnerships with other vendors who also sell into this market, digital platforms, and more. And the reason why I do this is number one, it helps me clear my thinking. Number
Okay.
two, what I like about this is that it does the work of about 45 minutes of Googling. And I like that. But the other reason why I really like it so much is that it's a co-pilot. So I'm someone who's neurodiverse. And so when I'm not fully engaged in something, like when I'm teaching, I can move mountains. Like I made 2 websites this morning and then I made a whole app last night because I was like, the sooner I get that done, the more time I can spend in my zone of genius of teaching. Because like I don't even really like coding that much. I only got into coding because it was going to help me spend more time teaching. So that's how my brain works. So having a co-pilot keeps me engaged. So that's why I really like it, because then rather than me getting disengaged and then my brain goes somewhere else and then I lose a lot of time, I just keep staying engaged. Look, we got this whole answer in a short amount of time.
Wow.
So to effectively generate leads for your insurance brokerage with the focus on physicians in New York and New Jersey, you can employ a variety of strategies that blend traditional field marketing with digital outreach and strategic partnerships. Here's 10 creative lead sources and strategies. So maybe have you gone to this conference?
Peers Healthcare. No.
And then here's the other cool thing. It was designed by researchers. And so every time they give you a suggestion, they give you a link and prove where they got it from. And now we actually, not only do we have a list, like the one conference that matches your geography, but we actually also have a full list of things that might be all things in your territory as well. Like there's a 24th annual employee healthcare conference happening in, no, that already happened. Oh, and so that's the
Right.
good thing. It knows what day it is, and so the options that already passed are already done. And so it looks like this, no, we technically passed this date, so it made a mistake. But notice how it's coming up with some pretty high quality
Yes,
I,
exactly.
I thought that
Also, what I see that's good about this is that it has the past date, so I'll be ready for next year.
exactly.
Because
And
it's
you,
going to happen around, and there's
yeah,
a lot of these that I've never went to.
yeah,
Because you can't
exactly.
be at one place at all at the same time,
All right,
and it
and
gets expensive.
exactly. And now it came up with this interesting idea. You can partner with medical associations. So you can establish partnerships with local medical associations and societies. So there's the Medical Society of the State of New York or the Medical Society of New Jersey, and they have events, newsletters, and other communications where you can reach their audience. And so now the next thing I'll do is I'll take a look at this. I'll then, maybe you can sign up for their newsletter, you can reach out to them, and then you can say, oh, hey, and sometimes that's the thing, smaller newsletters, they may be free for you to market into them, or you may have a way to pay a small fee to become a sponsor of this, and now you get more bang for your buck. Then you may have some kind of donation-based system, and then you also see that they have events too, and they have this event coming up here, an annual leadership summit, and that's going to happen in Middlesex and Mercer County. And you also get, and then boom, like you have the direct information. So hopefully people are seeing the value in this already. Hold on, I'm going to start closing tabs, and then
Definitely.
I'm going to DM this to you because I don't want you starting from scratch. So let me make sure that I DM you. And Lola, I mean, maybe this is something that can help you as well too. I know, granted, like this is still a little bit of a jump between your market, but hopefully, you're able to get value from something like this too. Now it's saying, hey, you can do a digital marketing PPC campaign. And so I'll tell you, this is an interesting idea. So you can actually come to the Facebook ads marketplace. And what you can do is you can I'll filter by all ads, and then what I'll do is I'll just type in physicians. I don't actually know how to spell physicians.
PHYSICIANS.
But now you can see everyone's ads, and then you can see, like, now you can get some creative ideas from this too. Now, notice this is not an AI idea. This is just kind of something that I would be thinking of. But now you're like, oh, this might be an organization you can partner with. This might be an organization that you can partner with. And then maybe you might want to take it a step further. And let's see, positions and how does this not work? So I'll just say positions. And then we might be able to see organizations or anyone who's also targeting this. And now this helps with business development, right? And so we might see, oh, the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care. Okay, well, that might be one option for you to partner with someone. There's New York okay, there's the UBMD Physicians Group. That might be someone. New York Bariatric Group might be someone that you may want to prospect into, and you can get a lot of rich data now, and you're like, okay, well, what are these people doing, and how might I actually want to partner with them? Or maybe you're going to do something similar. Let's see. So this is just something so that you can then learn about who else is advertising into this market. And then you can also see, okay, well, who has an effective ad? What's one of the most interesting things I see, because Lola said something that was so brilliant in the chat. She said physicians are time poor. And so one thing you could do is, if you make an ad, the ad could be centered around driving people to a video that you make for these physicians where you're educating them. And then they're time poor, maybe they can't take an actual meeting with you, but they can then, you can kind of put them into your funnel by having a super engaging video or a piece of content that they can consume directly on the spot. And then you can use that for driving leads as well. So that's another thing you can do. And I mean, look, we're only at number 3.
Yeah, this is
What-
fantastic.
Yeah, right? So take a look. I mean, the ideas get worse and worse a little bit as they go down, but there's some gems in here, like collaborating with medical equipment suppliers. And so if you find one of the field representatives for any of these individuals, and you can ask a follow-up question. Notice how when I highlighted this, it's going to say follow-up questions.
Right.
And now we can say, all right, well, who would you want to collaborate with? We might get a list of companies that we do want to collaborate with. And notice Jersey City Medical Supplies. Maybe they already have a Rolodex of physicians that they already know because they have, they have the relationship.
Exactly.
Similarly,
Wow, I think this is great. It took away hours and hours of me researching on the internet. And then there's
Yeah.
some things I may miss.
exactly.
And this just gives it all.
Yeah, and when you use the link that I DM to you, you're going to be able to get this whole conversation history already. And so then
Okay.
so then you get, it's like you're not starting from scratch either. So now Similian says, any suggestion for GPTs that are good for analyzing an image and performing Photoshop edits? If I was you, Similian, Adobe has been shipping a lot of AI features embedded directly into
Wow.
Adobe.
That's
So,
beautiful.
yeah, I know, really, really powerful. And notice how, they just added this jaguar drinking from a pond directly into there. So keep that in mind. So if I was you, Similin, learn how to use this. This is called embedded AI. This is going to be one of the big trends because everyone does not want to make a GPT. Everyone doesn't want to use Zapier. So more and more companies with the engineering resources are going to bake AI directly into their software. This is the best opportunity for you to be focusing your time on right now. But there are custom GPTs that will help you learn how to use Adobe products. Just go to the GPT store. And I demoed this in a previous class, but just go to the GPT store, type in Adobe. And you're going to see that there's an Adobe helper, and then there's specifically fitted ones to help you with Photoshop, stock image generators, After Effects assistants, a Premiere assistant, a Firefly prompter, and you can use something like that. And wow, look at that, you guys graduated. So one final thing I'll say is I am doing some business consulting. So if you're looking for like a done with you service where you we kind of go over what your problems are, and then we talk about how to use AI tools together, and I quickly show you how you can implement this in your business. I'm doing like a containerized offering for that. I also do provide a service where I just take a look at all your business needs, and then I can just set up a bunch of AI apps that you would need for your business. If you do want to create your own applications, I think that's like, if you're a little bit more advanced and you're ready for that, I do that. And then I do business coaching where I take in, these concepts of being an engineer and knowing where to focus time and energy. And then saying, all right, well, where do you need business coaching and where do you actually need AI? Where do you just need like very good systems in place? So if you're interested in that, I'll drop my email in the chat if you guys do want to reach out for that. And I'm going to just drop this into the meeting group chat. And the one thing that I really want to do is like I told you guys, my big dream and what I really want to do is I want to just make as many courses as I can. And I just want to make a bunch of really good mini courses because I realize people don't really have time. Things that you can consume in 1 or 2 hours. And so inside the Amplified Intelligence community, I'm going to be talking about like paid membership where you're gonna get access to every single course that I make. It's gonna be a bunch of mini courses, very similar to a lot of the things you saw in the back half of class tonight, where I go a little bit deeper on that, crash courses on things that can make you super productive. And I'm trying to keep that radically accessible at just like a $50 a month special for access to all the courses. Because then I'm like, if I do that, I can live my whole life on being a teacher, which would be my dream. And that was also the inspiration of the class. My belief is that on one hand, where we're going with AI right now, it's very scary. And I totally get how scary it can be. But if you learn about how to use it from first principles and you learn how to stay ahead of the trends, you have a very good window to then say, wait a second, like what kind of life is it that I actually want to live? And can I just go ahead and live that exact life? Like, would I be able to just like, kind of figure it out all using AI? And so that's kind of the journey that I'm going on. And yeah, so stay in touch via the Amplified Intelligence community. Like definitely drop questions in there because I'm going to keep that to be an active community. All right. And that's all I got to say. I think, was there one more question? Diane said, when you use those GPTs, are they private or do the person who created the GPT see your prompts? Yeah, anytime you use a GPT, nothing's private. But I'll show you the back end right now.
Thank you.
So I'm going to come to my GPTs. And let's see. So it's not giving me analytics, but you never know, that could change. Someone somewhere has access to them, to all the analytics. It's just not me who has access to the analytics, but someone at OpenAI and maybe some of their partners, they probably have access to everything.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to know. So it's not the individual person who created the GPT that has access to it, but it's somebody in ChatGPT that probably has it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, be very careful. Anytime you work with a tech company, they carte blanche have access to all your information. And trust me, I was there at these companies. You never know how even random people at the company are accessing your information and acting on it. Not to scare you, like, it's like, on one hand, like the big thing I'm kind of just knocking on the door with is that the United States government is asleep at the wheel. And AI and technology needs to be a conversation in this year's election. But I'm not going to go there because this is not a forum for politics. Samina says, can I ask for a quick example in amplified intelligence? Samina, what do you mean by that?
Just like you did with, just a minute ago with the case study. I'm just curious how I could approach using it, for my business.
Okay, but amplified intelligence is the group that
Yeah.
I wrote. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where else to ask you. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
and then I can't ask you for another.
Okay, cool.
35 minutes.
Cool. Yeah. So exactly, so when you do have questions, just post them in, just post them in the community. I always hate that it makes me sign in, which I just find to be quite annoying. But yeah, just come into the community. There's a section called questions in the community.
All he does is walk back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Not
Huh?
me. Not me.
Sorry.
Oh, I was a little confused. Wait, what just happened? I missed that.
Sorry, neighbors.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. I was like, what is that? Meanwhile, Mark says, amazing intro into a world that I knew nothing about. It'll be a while before I'm a power user, but now I see some of the roads to follow. Yeah. So I'm glad, it's tough. I really wanted to deliver on the promise of everyone becoming a power user at the end of it, but it's tough to do inside of a 2 hour, 2 hours, 4 weeks. But when I ship this content, everyone who is already signed up for the course, so you just come over to questions, post your questions in here. I'm still going to be doing, things inside of here. So go ahead and post inside of here. QEDC, you guys have access to this. So you can just come in here to the course. As I build out the content, I'm going to put it in here. The only thing is that the content takes a very long time for me to build. And with teaching content, like, it's an embodied practice. There's some things that you want to use AI for, and then there's some things you don't want to use AI for. If I brought my whole teaching flow into AI, it's one of those things where I think that it would probably lose its value. So there's some things that you want to use AI with, and there's some things that you got to say, no, that's where I draw the boundary. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this is valuable. And yeah, I wish you all the best. If you can, send a message to Bhavna, send a message to Josh, and send a message to Seth, telling them what you got from the course. And I'll be in the Amplified Intelligence Community Runway. I don't have a YouTube channel yet, but if you stay tuned in the Amplified Intelligence Community, I will be dropping a newsletter, and then eventually, once the newsletter's there, then I'm gonna drop the YouTube channel. And ideally, my goal is I want Amplified Intelligence to be the place where I'm creating my content first. And then once my content is there, then we'll use that as a ground. So if there's things that you want to see, you're like, hey Jai, like, how do I use this? And I start seeing that happen, then I know what content to make. I just dropped my LinkedIn into here as well. But like I said, email Bhavna, email Josh, and email Seth. And then in the Amplified Intelligence community, if you could drop a testimonial as well, that would help a lot. And yeah, it doesn't end here, because that's why we have the community. I began with that in mind, so that you have that for continued support. So that's all I got to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fantastic. I enjoyed it.
Thank
Good.
you, Jai.
I'm so glad.
Thank you very much.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Jay.
Jai. Jeez.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.